Hey friends, welcome to the Seven Pillars Talk Show. Tonight, I am so excited to have you join us. Thank you for joining us live. Thank you for joining us on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you are at. You know, in life, it takes layers and what I like to call pillars to get to our best life. And our Unbreakable Life journey consists of a 7-pillar program to help us go from a place of feeling like we're in an imposter syndrome, we're just struggling with day to day ideas, emotions, life, and take us to a place of authentic confidence. Those 7 pillars are so important, and they start with self discovery, mindset, mind shift, limiting beliefs, trauma, defining moments, our health, our community, and finally, discovering our purpose. Well, on the 7 Pillars Talk Show, I love partnering with individuals in the field that are out there every day taking care of their sector of the market and how they align with the 7 pillars. And tonight, I have a very special friend. I recently met her. She was a participant at our Unbreakable 2024 Women's Conference, and I just connected with her. And I'm so excited about this partnership and getting to share her with you, my Unbreakable friends. Mary Parker is with Infinite Potential Counseling, and she is an amazing woman who has a really cool story about how she got into this world that she's in today, making a difference for people in several different areas. So we're going to talk about that tonight. Our theme for tonight is mastering your mind, and she's going to talk to us about the uniqueness of individuals and how not, of course, every therapy works for everybody, but everybody has an opportunity to improve their thinking, improve their mindset, and really take their life to the next level. So I'm going to bring Mary onto the stage. If you guys will welcome her with me, give her a high five, a clap, or a comment as she comes on. And we are excited to have her with us. Hello, Mary.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Teresa.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And I have your coffee mug here with your amazing brain-inspired logo and this delicious tea that I am hooked on now.
Good.
Ah, horchata and cinnamon. I don't know who could have come up with a better combination, but Mary, more than tea, more than coffee mugs, I want to thank you for being with me tonight and for sharing your wisdom and really for sharing your story with me the other day. I was so impressed by who you are. And by showing up in your authentic self, you're changing the world. And I want to make sure that my people get to know you, they get to see you, hear your passion, and hear what you're doing. So please introduce yourself. Tell us what your practice is, what you do, and let's say how you got into it too.
Okay. So my name is Mary Parker, and I own Infinite Potential Counseling in Round Rock, Texas. We are very different from most counseling practices in that we look at the genetics behind mental health and how that's affecting you today, what the things are in your diet and in your environment that are causing those genes to present. And then we work with you so that we can correct those things by helping you find those genetics, looking at your diet, looking at your vitamins, talking to you about your sleep patterns, making sure that you are communicating effectively with the people around you, speaking up for yourself and letting your voice be heard while also letting other people be heard. We do everything very integratively. And one of the amazing things that we do in our practice is also neurofeedback. And we can take a map of the brain, see where the dysfunction in the brain is occurring, and then we can help to correct it. So, we have such an integrative approach. It's very unique in our field. And our goal is actually, I don't want you sitting in our practice forever. We want you to walk out the door with all the tools that you need for lifelong positive mental health.
I love that. Yeah. That probably was one of my favorite things to hear about as you were talking, because I think about the 7 pillars and it's every aspect of us, right? It's Absolutely. Our identity, and your DNA goes into your identity, and your mind mapping goes into your identity. And when I was thinking about this yesterday, I might have told you this. I feel like I've earned a PhD in me. Because we're so super focused on learning about external things, but then the most important thing that we have is what we have, like our minds, our will, our emotions, our heart, all of those things. And we usually spend little to no time there at all. Right. And so I love that you take the time with people and help them discover that.
Thank you. Yes. It's very, very rewarding. I love watching people come into our office and glow and find their true potential, because it's there, and it's really just about us helping open it up, so that they can achieve it.
Yeah, I love that. Yesterday I was working with somebody, a mutual friend, Stephanie McGurr, and she did this really cool project with me. And we did a lot of identification and digging into my mind around my unbreakable life journey and what does that look like for people so that I can present it the right way. And one of the things that I expressed to her that I really believe in is that so many people right now are living like in a world of like an imposter syndrome. Like, and I think we think of imposter syndrome as, I'm just not good enough, or I feel like I'm better than I am. But what I've really, as I've internalized imposter syndrome and looked at it from my perspective, it's when we pick up all the wrong hats and we try to be all these things that we aren't, and we don't feel like we align with those things. That's when we're living in that constant space of imposter syndrome, when we're always looking outward to figure out what's going on instead of looking inward. Yep. And so my goal is to help people, and it sounds very much in line with yours, but to help them come from a place of feeling like they're constantly in imposter syndrome to authentic confidence. Yes. I am authentically me, and I am confident in who I am.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's so very important. We see children as young as 3 and 4 that aren't sure, and they're not supposed to be at 3 or 4. Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? What is my role even inside of the family? And very often we have kids that are anxious or depressed at very young ages just because they're confused about that. And part of that confusion starts with parents being confused. And, our kids, they model our behavior. Yeah. So if it's something that we're showing, if it's something that we're saying, well, then they're going to do those same things.
What a great segue to my question for tonight. Okay. I was chatting with another friend today, and we were talking about our generation. Okay. And I'm 43. So my generation, and maybe older, we always had this idea that suck it up, buttercup, don't show emotions, get in there and get it done, fake it till you make it, kind of all those things. And now we're raising children with a total different generational programming from the schools. They're really getting into mental health. They're really talking about emotions. And now it's wonderful. But when they come to us as their parents with emotional things, and we've been programmed, suck it up, buttercup, and that wants to be the response that is just like flowing out, but it's not. How do we bridge that gap of creating and fostering that environment and that place where emotions matter, number one, and we all have them, number two, and how do we express them and how do we communicate? Because if we're not talking to our children about it, who are they talking to?
They're talking to their friends, and they're talking to social media.
And do you want them raising?
So we work with a lot of parents around how to have these conversations with kids. And it really all starts with us as the parent. If as a parent, we're not identifying our own emotions, I'm a mom, I have 3 kids. I know that I've been angry before, but did I ever take the time to go, you know what, I'm feeling angry right now. This is what I need to do so that I don't feel angry. Yeah. Because again, our kids learn from us. So if our response to anger is yelling, throwing things, or, having a type of tantrum, and, when you're a 3-year-old and an adult's having a fit, whether they're yelling or what do you think that looks like to them? It looks like a giant tantrum. There's this big person who's having this emotional response. So us as parents, even being able to go, you know what, I'm feeling mad right now, or I'm feeling anxious today. So I'm sorry if it seems like I am being snappy, or, I'm not engaged right now. My mind is elsewhere. It's not about something that you did. I don't hate you. I'm not angry with you. Just having those honest, open honest conversations with our children, but identifying our feelings so that they know that it's okay and that these feelings are normal.
So what I'm hearing you say is not only identify it, but verbalize it.
Absolutely verbalize it.
Yes.
We cannot expect our kids to name and then deal with an emotion that we have not provided them the information on. We think that because we know what the feeling is, our kids just automatically know what that feeling is too. Most kids don't have any idea what it is that they're feeling. They just know that this feels uncomfortable, or, my heart is racing and I'm not really sure why. There must be something wrong. But if we don't take the time to not only point out our feelings, but then point out theirs. So, if your child is having a hard time saying, okay, Cindy, it looks like you're feeling very angry right now.
Right.
What is it that's making you feel so angry? And what do you think we need to do so that you don't feel angry?
Yeah. I like that a lot. And maybe how do you want to feel, right? I mean, for ourselves, that brings me to another thought. I know that obviously, thankfully, in Taylor and in Round Rock and Cedar Park, we weren't really affected by the storm last night. However, I do have some friends that are in the Temple area, and I know that created a very tense environment for people. And there were people that were in the bathrooms huddled together and in closets huddled together. And that was a very traumatic moment for the adult, but also for the child, seeing the adult respond in that fearful, very scary moment. So when you experience trauma like that, potentially together as a family, what would you recommend as a way to work through that so that every time Johnny walks by that closet, he's not afraid to go in the closet? Or, so can you talk a little bit about that? Because that was a shared moment of trauma, but that the babies maybe internalize and it becomes a programming time.
Well, it's really about talking about it. It has now passed. So coming back to the table and saying, we had this really, really big experience yesterday, and I am so sorry that we had to go through that. There are things in life we don't have control over. And unfortunately, weather is one of those things. What we have control over is protecting ourselves in those situations. And this is why we did the things that we did. What are your thoughts and feelings about that? And even sharing your own thoughts and feelings, like I was terrified, that something was going to happen to you or to your brother or to your father or whoever the family members are. Just making it so that having those feelings and identifying them is an open, honest conversation. We don't talk to our kids enough. We don't talk enough in general about emotions and feelings and what it is that everybody experiences. But human beings, we have over 300 emotions available to us.
Wow.
Yep. And it can be a little tiny emotion. It can be a medium emotion, and it can be a really huge emotion. Some emotions come and they go, and we don't even identify that they occurred because they were that small. But they happen for us every single day in every single life.
So I did an exercise a couple of years ago with my coach, and she had us name the top emotions that we had. And of course, the ones that I would come up with were happiness and joy and anger and, excitement and fear and sadness. What are some of that's maybe 10 that I can come up with off the top of my head. What are some other ones that maybe we don't recognize as an emotion, but are key drivers in our lives?
Embarrassment is a huge one. A lot of people don't identify that as an emotion, but it absolutely is. And it's a huge driver for things that we do. It's why kids don't raise their hand in class to ask a question when they don't understand something. They're embarrassed that one of their classmates is going to look down on them or they're going to look stupid. And that's a huge one that we work with a lot of kids around. But even something as simple as tired is an emotion. We see it as something that has to do with more a physical thing, just like hunger. But both of these things are actually also an emotion. And if we're tired or we're hungry, well, we're going to be more moody. There's where that hangry situation comes from. So I'm hungry, and that's why I'm feeling angry. How many kids are angry because they're just hungry and they're not communicating and tying those two emotions together?
And we teach that a lot of times, don't we? Yikes.
Yep.
Wow. Wow. Things that we teach, we don't always think about the things that we teach. And we also don't always put proper weight on the words that we speak.
Mhm.
And that was one of my mind shift moments. I have this the story I love to share about the 5 shifts that God showed me in my personal life. But one of the mind shifting moments that He really talked to me and really convicted me of is, if I'm going to have a mouth that speaks into the ears of people on a stage or on a platform like this, or even one-on-one with my family, I need to be very careful of the words that come out of my mouth, because that ear is a very sensitive ground that's going to pull all those things in. And, for a silly, simple example of this, I remember when I was at this women's retreat, and I was confronted because I told everybody, I don't cry. Like, that's not me. I don't cry. I'm not a crier, whatever. I don't cry. And they were like, what? And I said, well, I was told when I was a kid, stop crying.
Mhm.
And so I stopped crying. And so I suppressed it. And when they finally got under the surface, I had about 20 years worth of tears come out,
Oh, wow. Yep.
But I think, sometimes we say things so flippantly that we do damage, or we create a thought that's not even grounded into the hearts of other people. Can you speak on that a little bit about just, our words and how people receive words? Because when you talked about embarrassment, I think about when I was young, and I'm dyslexic, but when I was and I know how to manage it now, but when I was younger, I would like make up words as I'm reading. Like, there was not a word there, but I put a word there, and I would get so embarrassed, and then they would laugh and they would snicker, and it was probably uncomfortable, but it was those seeds that were planted.
Yep.
So could you talk a little bit about, how we plant those seeds and why it affects people?
So we as human beings, we have what's called a negativity bias, and our brain loves to pick up on the most negative thing that we hear. And it will hold on to that little tiny seed and make it grow as big as it possibly can. And it will take that seed and it will generalize it across every single area of our life. And it is just a human trait and tendency that we have. Most people, I know some very, very positive people. I've met people who can stay positive in almost every moment of their lives. But when I sit down with them and I actually talk to them about everything,
Mm,
all of the negative things that they're holding on to are still back there. They're hidden behind the face of the positivity that they're giving to everybody else. And
wow.
that is just because we are such negative creatures inside of our brain. Our brain takes that and it just multiplies it over and over and over again. And just like you can hear something that's really, really positive, when somebody gives you amazing praise, you can hear that again. And you may hear it a few more times, but you can hear that thing that somebody said that was negative thousands of times, just over and over again. Your brain doesn't let it go.
Yeah.
Um, we see that frequently.
Yeah. One of the things that I picked up is that, and feel free to correct me, but I always like to say our brain is looking for facts and our mind is looking for evidence to
Yep.
support. And so, just like you said, with that filter process, we're looking for evidence in every situation to support, those programmed moments. And so, if we want to be negative or we want to be angry, we're going to look for reasons, to do that. And maybe it's not a conscious want, like you said, it's that behind the scenes kind of thing. So, how can we, if we know that that's there, how can we work through it so that we see things from a different lens?
This is all again going back to having those honest, open conversations. So continue to talk about those things. Even as a parent, um, I've yelled at my kids because I was angry about something that had absolutely nothing to do with them. So when I looked back at myself, I went back to my kids and I said, you know what? I am really sorry. In
Mm,
that moment, I was mad about whatever it was. I was not actually angry with you, and I should never have yelled at you. So let's talk about all of the good things that show how wonderful a person you are and all of the reasons why I have not to be mad at you. So you have to not only challenge, well, you have to apologize for the things that you do wrong, even as a parent to a child, because again, children model your behavior. If you're not apologizing, why are they going to? Okay. But then also we have to talk about the good things and try to fix those things that we just broke by whatever it was we said.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we can break spirits by our words.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's so important, and communication is so important to me. I believe that communication is one of the best expressions of love that we can give if we're using it in a way to meet people at their level and not as selfish, just barking at people or doing those types of things, but really wanting to connect through communication. I feel like probably most problems in the world would be solved with a little humility and a lot of communication. Maybe a lot of both, but I want to talk to you about something that I was on this Facebook page earlier today in my husband's industry, and I picked up on a comment. I was also in line today at lunch, and I picked up on a comment, and I'm hearing these common comments that are out there of people they're hungry right now. We've come off of the pandemic. We've come off of, all of this stuff, and it's still a journey coming out of it because so much programming happened during that time. So much, again, our mind was looking for evidence and everything was chaos, right? Yep. So we're coming off of this, and people, they forfeit a bunch of things. They were separated from their communities and work locations because a lot of people worked remotely. They were separated from their congregations at church. They were separating from all these things. And so now they're like, okay, who am I? Like there's this really big hunger in them. And it's not like a midlife crisis thing because it's every generation, every age across the board. I feel like people are hungry for discovering who they are again. And of course, I'm a little biased. I have a 7-pillar journey that I can help them with. But speaking to the masses, what would you say would be, a good way to kind of start thinking about that? Because they're hungry. They're hungry for it.
So one of the biggest things that everybody missed during the pandemic and everything that's happened since then is that big social piece, right? So really finding a sense of community right now is where everybody needs to start. And what does your community look like? So is your community other moms? Is your community other business owners? Is your community other women that don't have children and don't want children? Is it a church community? Is it a homeschool community? I think right now, before anybody can figure out who they are as a person, they have to start looking for that community piece again, because what they are hungry for the most is that social piece that was taken away.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, as wonderful as Zoom is for everything that we were able to use it for, it doesn't give us the interpersonal interaction that people really, really need. We are social creatures, and that social part that we need is that in-person part that was taken from us.
Yeah. And so when people say, well, I don't need, so I was talking to somebody the other day, she came by to pick up something, and she told me, my husband started working from home and he's like in his underwear, like 24/7. And he only showers maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And I'm thinking, there's probably more people that are doing that than we have any idea about, and no shame, but that is a response to probably a feeling of what's the point.
Mm-hmm. It sounds depressive.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, they need a community.
Yep.
But when you're used to, when you're stuck in that thinking of what's the point, I survived without them.
Mm-hmm.
It's a job.
There's a difference between surviving and thriving.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that.
So we can survive independently, but how enjoyable is that really for most of us? Mm-hmm. I know a lot of introverts, and even those introverts still really want people to talk to. They have their small circle of other introverts and that one extrovert, that kind of finds their way in there.
Yeah. It's usually me. I'm like,
that's me too with all of our friend groups. So even introverts, they have a need for other people. As human beings, we are social. When we are taken completely out of a working environment and a social environment, and we're just stuck at home, we're not thriving. We are just surviving, and we're just getting by. And that is not what we were intended to do.
Now, I know you're super familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs because that is your field, but I always look at that pyramid, and I look at when we're in the pandemic era, which I call it an era, because it wasn't just COVID. I mean, there were so many things that happened during that time that kept us in survival and shelter and survival and shelter. But the next level up is love and belonging. Hello. Before you can figure out who you are, you got to have people that are going to accept you and support you and grow with you and all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. So that pyramid is so important because it has your foundation, but then that foundation is your building block for everything else. And you cannot skip any of those steps along that pyramid before you get to the top.
I think of right now, I mentioned a lot of people are in search of purpose. In fact, I follow a lot of people in my space of empowerment and inspiration and coaching and those types of things. And they're singing the song, they're telling the story, let's find your purpose. But if they're not dealing with this first, you can't go from survival to purpose, because purpose is always attached to people. And your community will help you discover where those desires in your heart are and what that hunger is and where that pain point is, because it will take you to a place of growth. So when I see, and it's a lot of times I see people that are promoting, let me take you to your purpose, but they don't start with who you are and, getting you connected and growing and all of those things. You can't flip a switch. We're not made that way. We don't have, what is it, Dr. Heckle? And I don't know how to say that. But anyway, but we can't just boom, right? There's a succession process.
Yep. Well, and that's how kids grow too, right? So if we aren't laying each of those steps of that foundation for our children, they can't be successful either. We can't expect a child to figure out who they are if we are the parent who doesn't have a social circle. We aren't exposing our kids to different people and different environments and different experiences.
Yeah.
I have some very, very good friends. They are very much introverts. And they run amazing businesses. They are wonderful, wonderful people, but they have a child who is not an introvert. He is very much an extrovert. And he craves that being out in public, going and having those experiences and going to those places. And because they are introverts, having extroverted friends is important for their son, because he is able to go with the extrovert friends that are in their circle and have the experiences that he needs.
Yeah.
So community is a huge, huge part of life for all of us. And it's very important, not only for us, but for our kids.
Yeah, I love that. Community is pillar number 6 in my 7 pillars. And it is so important. And one of the classes that I teach on, and specifically present on to nonprofits, but it could be to businesses that are trying to hire people, is really the 5 key ingredients to connecting with and growing that base. Because while they're hungry, if they don't have connection points, they're not going to know you exist, right? So they got to see you. They got to know your vision. They've got to have, communication. They've got to know where these places are. Otherwise, we've got all these great organizations that want to give you community, but nobody knows how to find them.
Right.
So anyway, and it's a dual responsibility, right? The organization has to do their part, and we got to do ours too. We're stewards over ourselves as well. Well, one of the things is we kind of go through some thinking on here. We talked a little bit about my generation and beyond, kind of having a stigma around therapy, and the younger generations they're getting a little bit more education around it. The pandemic certainly brought emotional health, mental health to the forefront more than we've probably seen in any other time and era. In fact, this is funny. When I was going through my life coaching program a couple of years ago, we were on a call and my friend said, "I want to introduce you to Dr. So-and-so, a psychotherapist." I'm like, "Wait, what? What call am I on? Like, what's wrong with me? What am I doing here?"
Yep.
Because I had this stigma that there's got to be something wrong with me if I need a therapist. That's not true. We all need support. How do we change that thinking that, number one, it is okay to not be okay. But number two, that we can all use some help. We can all use the right person's eyes to help us see things from the right perspective.
So the stigma behind mental health, unfortunately, does exist. However, everybody needs somebody to talk to. And we have plenty of people inside of our practice who aren't here because they're struggling with something. They're here because they just want to be better at something. And whether that's to be a better parent or a better spouse, a better business owner, or somebody who is just able to communicate with their community better. We have plenty of people who seek counselors more about being their better self or their best self possible than just because something is wrong. Certainly, we work with people who have things like depression and anxiety and all of those things. But we have a lot of people who really are just trying to get to the best possible version of themselves. And there's lots of counselors that's all that they do. There's mindset counselors that just focus on how to have that more positive outlook and be the more positive person. Or, you have some that work with executive functioning. So how to get yourself organized and how to do that advertising and how to motivate yourself to do those things that maybe you don't want to do, like your taxes or.
I bet they have vodka or something. No, I'm just kidding. Strong coffee.
So, counselors do a lot of different things, and our job is not always because there's something wrong. There can be things that are very, very right. We also work with couples that are going into a marriage and they just want to make sure that they're laying a solid foundation for their relationship. Or, they also want to lay a solid foundation so that when they have children, there's a good environment that they're bringing their children into. We have lots of parents that we work with that are pregnant right now and just want to be a really good parent and a good spouse to their partner when the baby comes. So there's lots of reasons why you can be working with a counselor. And, the mental health field, there's so many different aspects to it.
Right. One thing I discovered, and I really feel strongly about, is the wrong person with the right information can destroy you. But the right person with the right information can take you to heights that you've never even considered.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of times, again, we've been brought up with thinking, don't tell anybody your problems, or now we're starting to share more things, but we have to have discernment on the right people, because I think more dreams are killed and visions are squashed and all those things because of, somebody's inability to counsel properly because they weren't trained, right? When I walk people through the 7 pillars, I go into defining moments in trauma. I go into a place of talking about limiting beliefs and mindset and mind shift. But when it comes to a place that somebody needs additional support, I always refer out, because I'm not trained. I'm not a trauma-informed therapist. I'm not, I am not able, I don't want to open Pandora's box. There's certain things that I can't do, but there are some things I can do. And as a person with discretion, I can help a lot of people that way. But there's a value in bringing people to the right person. So if somebody's thinking, do I need extra therapy or support? What are some questions maybe they could ask themselves to help them discover whether they should take a step and reach out to you?
So that's a big question. Okay.
I'm good at that.
Because we work across the lifespan. Our practice, I work with kids that are 3 to 12, but I have counselors in our practice that work all the way through 103. Questions can be around behavior. Am I angry too frequently? Am I responding to my anger the right way? Am I being a good role model for my children? Is my child's, we get a lot of parents that are seeking an answer as to whether or not their child has ADHD. So is there a concern that your child has ADHD, or is this normal development for a child?
Sure.
Because there's not a lot of education. There's a lot of stuff out there right now about, ADHD, and it seems like everybody has it, but who's talking to you about what does normal growth and development look like for a child?
Right.
So those questions, what are some things that I can do to make my house more peaceful? How can I be the better spouse? Am I communicating effectively? There's so many different questions. It really depends on the person. So that's not a simple one for me to answer.
Well, you did good anyway. I love those questions, though. And you know what I love most about questions is that it causes us to pause and think. Asking questions turns off all the distractions, and it
Yep.
makes your mind go directly to a solution. So I love that. So maybe you created some clarity for some people with some of those questions tonight. I love that.
I hope so.
Well, Mary, I was so blown away by all of the things that you do. And I was very impressed by your story that led to why you got into this, why you chose to do it, what created that purpose in you to help people in this capacity. Would you share your story?
Sure. Okay. So counseling is actually not my first career. My first degrees were actually culinary arts, travel and tourism, and hotel restaurant management. I worked for years in the hospitality industry. I was a wedding planner. I was a chef. I've worked in retail, and I had a lot of fun doing those things. I even owned a paintball field for a little while because we enjoyed playing paintball when I was younger, before we had kids. I've worked in the pharmaceutical field. I've gone to school for pharmaceutical, but my son was injured. He was injured at 18 months. The DTaP shot had some very negative side effects for him. We had seizures. We were, I just lost the child that I had up to that point. And we ended up working with some naturopathic doctors and finding that there were some things going on. And we got him detoxed. And then at 3, he was shook by a daycare provider. And we started down the entire path again. Mm-hmm. And of course, the first response for every doctor that we worked with was, well, let's try medication. So at 3, when he was shook, he had a traumatic brain injury, and we were having a lot of behavioral problems. And we tried medication, and that was definitely the wrong choice for my child. He went, we started medication within a few days. At 3 years old, he was suicidal. Wow. He was having hallucinations, and very, very poor experience. So we ended up working with geneticists at Yale, because at the time we were living in Connecticut, and we discovered that he has this genetic profile that makes it so that medication is not an option for him. Wow. He can't process it. He can't detox it. And every single doctor that we worked with, so I'm a young mom at this point in time. I am still working at Pfizer while I'm going through all of this, dealing with my son. And I have to now navigate, well, what do genetic mutations look like? How do I have to modify his lifestyle? What has to change with our diet? What has to change with his vitamins? And then what are the services that he needs so that we can get past this? Because we've already done this once. I know that it's possible to do. I just wasn't getting answers from doctors. So I got really frustrated, and I decided, okay, well, then I'm just going to go back to school, and I'm going to figure out how I'm going to fix this. So I did, and I went back to school. I got to do my practicum hours while I was in graduate school at the Yale Child Study Center. I got to do some hours working in the genetics department, and I got to learn a whole lot while I was there. But I took everything that I was learning and I applied that to what was happening with my son. And I learned as I was going through this process, I wasn't the only one. I found a whole bunch of other parents who were experiencing the same things that we were going through, and that were having the same type of reactions and discovering the same type of genetic issues. And there's a huge community of people out there who've been injured, whether it's from medications or a vaccine or, something in their environment, a concussion, whatever it may be. So I dove into it because I had a child that I needed to fix. And in fixing my own child, I created my path. I found out what it was that I really wanted to do. And that is, I wanted to help other people. I wanted to help other people heal their child too. And I have such a passion for it. And I love watching the kids and the families that come into our office that go from having these huge emotional reactions and these tantrums, and they're throwing things and they're breaking things and there's fights happening all of the time, to just being a happy, healthy person again.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, they always say our purpose is attached to pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that is so deeply moving in us that will help us get through the hard. I mean, I'm sure you sacrificed tons of time to make that happen, but you were so anchored in your purpose that you weren't going to deviate the plan, right?
No,
and I think that's beautiful. And, you know, it's beautiful that so many other families are also going to receive this amazing treatment because of your passion for it. So I love that. I love that. So you mentioned DNA,
Mm-hmm.
which we don't talk about enough.
Mm-mm.
And we go through school and I remember like maybe one little 30-second recording that we watched that showed the DNA ladder, right? And that was it. We weren't taught to learn about ourselves. And so jokingly, when I say I've gotten now like a PhD in me, it's so empowering to know who you are uniquely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because without that knowledge, any supplement you take could be hurting you instead of helping.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a waste of money, even if it's not hurting you, right? The food we're eating could be causing chaos in our bodies, emotionally, mentally, or whatever, right?
Yep.
So you mentioned that you take this integrated approach.
Mm-hmm.
What does that process look like, kind of from start to finish? Say you've got a new client onboarded, and they came in for therapy, but you think maybe we need to go a little deeper. How does that look?
So, because we have 8 counselors, so it's dependent on which counselor you end up with is dependent on what the diagnosis is, what the age group is, etc. But each of our counselors knows that there's certain things that we're looking for when we're working with someone. So we're looking for genetic history inside of the family.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for repeated patterns of behavior inside of the family. So things like we all know that diabetes, heart disease, cancer, like that's all genetic. But so is addiction, so is ADHD, so is anxiety and depression and schizophrenia and bipolar. Like those are all things that actually have a genetic influence behind them.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody that wants to do genetic testing, then they meet with me. I do about a 90-minute intake where I'm gathering family health history, going back to great grandparents and out to cousins, nieces, and nephews. We talk about diet. What are you putting into your body every day that could also be influencing behavior? We have you keep a food mood diary for 30 days so that we can see what is that food trigger for you. Because another thing that people don't talk about is food sensitivity. And having a sensitivity to a food is different than an allergy. You're not having an anaphylactic response. You're not breaking out in a rash, but you could be having a behavioral response.
Right.
Something that people aren't talking about. And that response can happen as much as 72 hours after eating whatever that food is.
Wow.
So very often, you think that you're eating fine that day, but all of a sudden your kiddo was throwing a tantrum and you just can't seem to make sense of it. But 3 days ago, they ate something that was a food trigger.
Interesting.
So we go through all of that and I sit down. The genetic test is a spit swab. You do it first thing in the morning before you brush your teeth or take anything to drink. And you send that in and we get back an extensive report. It's over 30 pages. It gives us all of the genes. So we can take a look at, lactose intolerance, gluten intolerance, peanuts, fish are on the test. We look at how you are processing your neurochemicals, because there are certain genes like MAO, DAO, COMT, and MTHFR that if they're not functioning correctly, well, you could be over processing your neurochemicals or under processing your neurochemicals.
Wow.
And all of either situation, there are symptoms. There's symptoms of there not being enough of the neurochemical, and there's symptoms of over toxicity of a neurochemical. So we sit down and we look at that entire genetic profile, and we look at the ladder and we say, okay, this one's down here. And because this one has a mutation on it and is not working correctly, it's affecting everything that's above it. And this is what we need to do. So these are the vitamins we can use. These are the modifications we need to use as far as your diet. And we have to take a look at also your sleep patterns, and just make sure that we have a completely healthy body.
Yeah. Well, and what does that affect in them? What do they see the result of working through that?
So most people begin to realize, that they, so say you have a gluten or dairy sensitivity. And again, a sensitivity is different than an allergy. Right. So these may be people that have those red bumpy rashes on the back of their arms, or eczema or dermatitis. And they didn't realize that it was actually because of a food sensitivity. Mm-hmm. And if we remove that food sensitivity, then those symptoms go away. But then, symptoms of inflammation that lead to things like rashes, inflammation goes through your entire body. It starts in your gut, and then it goes out into your cells and makes it to your organs, into your brain. So how much of your anxiety and your depression is also actually tied to something that you've been putting into your body, not realizing that you're sensitive to it. Wow. So, we start with something very simple and come to find out that it has a much larger impact over your life. You're not in pain anymore. You're able to focus. Brain fog is gone. All of those things. So it's person to person, dependent on how intense the genetic profile is, and then how many changes we have to make. Some people notice changes pretty immediately and they feel better. Other people, it can take 6 to 9 months, even a year, because we're combating, especially with an adult that has been putting things into their body their entire life. Mm-hmm. We have to combat a life of inflammation.
And probably a lifetime of saying, but I really want that chocolate.
Yeah.
Or I really can't live without coffee. Yeah. Yep. So you meet somebody that gives you horchata tea. Which is so good. Wow, I love that. And it's, and I love the whole approach that you take. I feel like, again, when we get super in tune with who we are. My favorite quote, I think I told you this the other day, but my favorite quote of all time is from Carl Jung. And it says, he said, those who look outside dream. Mm-hmm. Those who look inside awaken. Mm-hmm. And that's so profound and so powerful, because if we're looking outward, which is the way our eyes are faced anyway, yep. We're always looking and hoping and wishing and thinking. There's a whole song, I think, like that. I'm not going to sing it. But anyway, we're doing all those things. But when we turn the eyes inward and we look inside ourselves and we get to know ourselves uniquely, we can come to a place that we find harmony and balance and authentic confidence, like I talk about, at a whole new level. And it sounds, Mary, so much like the services that you provide really help people do that, because it's not just a look at my emotion, but it's a look at what's triggering that and how do I deal with it in a holistic way. Yes.
Yes. Yep. Understanding that you have a gene that makes it so that if you eat cheese, you're going to be more anxious that day is kind of important. Because you don't want to be eating cheese on the day when having high anxiety is kind of going to tank the entire day for you, right? Mm-hmm. So just understanding what your genetics hold for you. And so just knowing that you have the gene doesn't mean that it's necessarily presenting. Most people that end up in our office, they're here because something is presenting, or they have a concern that something is going to present. Mm-hmm. But, so the phrase that they taught me while I was at Yale was genetics loads the gun, but diet and environment pulls the trigger.
Ooh, yeah.
And that was such a powerful statement. It's always stuck with me, because they're right. Just because we have a gene for something doesn't mean that we're going to develop it. It's the choices that we make in our life and with our diet that really influence that. And, even stress plays a part. Yeah. So learning how to manage our stress and our anxiety, just being able to identify those things. And some people are actually, there's a gene that is called the worrier gene. And if you have it, you're more likely to be worried. You're more
Wow.
likely to be anxious.
Wow.
So just knowing that that's there, and then what are the vitamins you can use so that you can kind of
Calm it.
calm that down is important.
Mhm. That's really cool. When I did my DNA profile, it tells you like what your superpower is. I could have already known this. My superpower is my sense of smell. Like I can almost taste something before it gets in my mouth because it's so strong.
Mhm.
But we
Yep.
all have something. So, I mean, just to take your DNA test to find out about yourself, I think it's so, so cool. Well, Mary, I appreciate so much your willingness to jump on and share your knowledge and your wisdom with us and your passion for why you support people the way that you do. How can people find you?
So we have a website, Infinite Potential TX, I think it is. I hope.
We'll post it. Yeah.
We are available on social media. So we've got a Facebook page, we have Instagram, we have Twitter, which is now X. So you can find us across the web. We have a Google page, and we also have an Apple business page.
And I did notice in that fun packet you gave me that you take a lot of different insurance companies.
Yep, we are on, I think, 32 different panels for insurance, including Medicaid and Medicare, because we want to make sure that everyone has access to service.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you for doing the amazing work that you do. And I do hope that those that are watching it live or maybe watching it later, or maybe they catch a reel because we're going to slice this and make it into reels for people, that they'll have a chance to connect with you. And I know that they will see you at Unbreakable on August 22nd because you're going to have a booth there and ways to connect there. But ladies and gentlemen, feel free to reach out to Mary between now and then. Grab a coffee with her, have a chance to get to know the brilliance of who this woman is and let her passion provide purpose in your family too. So thank you all for watching tonight, the Unbreakable Life 7 Pillars journey. And thank you, Mary, for being on with us tonight. You guys have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next time on the 7 Pillars Talk Show. Bye.
Thank you.